Well, I was a tutor in high school with children who were having struggles in learning, and it made me decide that I wanted to go into special ed in college. So when I went to Carolina, the first thing I did was to sign up to be a volunteer at the state residential facility for people with significant cognitive delays, Murdoch Center. And I went there dutifully every week, worked with some boys who had fairly mild disabilities and were there instead of getting incarcerated. So spent a year working on a behavior modification ward with them, really enjoyed it, and next year I went back. Well, they'd never had anybody who came back. And so they said, oh, now you're the chairperson of people with volunteers working at Murdoch Center. So they said, oh, you came back, so maybe you'd work on the NAB ward. And I said, sure, I'll work anywhere, not knowing, of course, what the NAB meant. It means the non-ambulatory ward. And so we went there, and it was, really scary to me as a sophomore in college, and individuals with extremely severe physical, cognitive impairments, and I decided that, yeah, that is where I wanted to work. And so they put me in touch with this amazing young woman named Cheryl, who was about 2 years younger than me, had lived at home till she was 16, and could no longer be physically carried by her family, and so they had to place her at Murdoch Center with great sadness, and visited her whenever they could and sent letters all the time. They were fabulous. And so I was Cheryl's buddy, went out to see her every week. Well, about 3 weeks into my visits, Cheryl started saying, let's bring Linda with us, because I would take Cheryl in her little snaffy wheelchair, and we'd zip on over out of this horror that was her life, this enormous ward with 16 huge metal cribs for adults. And I would take her, and I'd take her to the sunroom. And Cheryl was totally blind and was physically challenged, had one arm that worked well, and fun and engaging, had sort of cocktail party speech, and really fun to talk to. And so we would go down, sit in the solarium in the sunshine, and so she could feel the sunshine on her face and get out of that ward. Well, about 3 weeks in, she started saying, let's take Linda. And here I am, this little 19-year-old, and I just don't get it. Linda didn't seem to me to be aware that we're taking her. And I just, but I wanted to please Cheryl, and that was my job, to be there and be a friend to Cheryl. And so I'd push Cheryl and pull Linda. Well, Linda didn't have a wheelchair. Some wonderful person, I realize now, who was, someone who fixed equipment, such as air conditioners and so forth out there, had taken a piece of plywood and put 4 casters on it and added a canvas sling-back chair. And so Linda's in this chair, all slumped up like this. And so every week I push Cheryl and pull Linda. It takes a long time to get down there, and we get down there, and now Cheryl and I have a wonderful conversation, and Linda's making some noises, but at this point I still don't really get it. I just don't get it at all. Well, about 6 weeks later, where I get there, and Linda is sitting there, and tears are going down her cheeks. And so I, of course, assume she's in pain. What do I know? And so I told Cheryl, I don't think Linda feels good today. She's crying. And she said, oh, no, she's just upset. And I said, well, what's she upset about? And she said, Doug died. We were really worried. We were afraid he's going to die, and he finally died. And I said, oh, Cheryl, I'm so sorry. Is he somebody on the next ward? And she looked at me. She's like, Caroline, Doug? One life to live? What? And it was just this complete flip of the script, saying, here's this person on a soap opera that Linda watches, and she's really sad. She said, Linda and I have been worried for weeks that he might die. And so then the next week I came, and so we went down as usual, and now I'm talking to Linda more, getting it, that this is someone who really knows what's happening, and I'm, just starting to realize everything I've missed for the last 10 weeks. So the next week, before I went to pick up Linda, I said, Cheryl, I just wanted to know, how do you know that Linda was upset about Doug? Like, how do you guys communicate? Because Cheryl is blind and Linda's completely on the other side of the room. And she said, oh, well, we've worked out a system. She said, you see, when it's time for One Life to Live, or Days of Our Lives, or whatever, she said, I like to tell them to turn it on, but they watch the other soap opera, then they meaning the caregivers. And so I will tell, I will say, please turn to One Life to Live, and they are just kind of ignore me. Well, then when I say that, she said, Linda will start screaming, and she screams. And she said, and now I don't even have to say anything. Linda just watches the clock, and when it's time, she starts yelling, and she won't stop yelling, and they finally turn it. And she said, they didn't listen to me, but they listened to Linda. Like, okay. And so the more I realized that Linda is someone who really understands, and I didn't do anything. I mean, I didn't help Linda get a communication device. I didn't know anything about that at this point. But what I did do was, talk to her more, include her more, and think about it more. And then I saw a student out there who had a communication board the next year.